The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means. That's Stefan, Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. This is your Friday pod. It's kind of a cleanup pod. You know how they have filler episodes when you watch a TV show? That's essentially, I think, what this pod is going to turn into. Because there's like a lot of things happening, but none of them are happening directly in the Ohio State sphere because Ohio State is a normal program with normal problems. They're too busy on tour because they won a national title. So Jack Sawyer and Will Howard are going on podcasts, reliving that time and talking about fans should be happy they won a natty even if they lost to Michigan. Ryan Day's at the courthouse and on down the list there. They're getting drafted. This is a fun time to be an Ohio State fan because there's no drama around your program right now. And there probably won't be for another couple of weeks until recruiting starts. And then, Andrew, people are going to be asking you to text 614-350-3315. How come we don't have a 5-star offensive lineman in the class yet? But we'll get there when we get there. Today, we're just taking a peek around college football and seeing what the heck is going on. But also, I asked our texters just for some thoughts, just for some rants, for some questions. So I want to start here from Dan in Wisconsin. I get frustrated every time when discussing this past season's playoff run. The Ohio State beat, including the Buckeye Talk pod, often talk about the Texas game as if Ohio State would have lost if the goal line stand and Scoop and Sawyer had not occurred. Ohio State was up by 7 points, and there was over 2 minutes of time left in regulation. My money would have been on OSU to score again and win in regulation. Please stop assuming Texas wins if they would have tied the game. Let's live in this world. Jack Sawyer doesn't get the scoop and score. Let's just say he doesn't get the sack. Let's just say instead of Texas failing on 4 straight goal line situations, they score on one of those 4 straight goal line situations. And so now instead of it being 28 to 14, it's 21 to 21. And there's 2 minutes left and Ohio State gets the ball. Map out how the last 2 minutes of the game plays. Stefan, you first.
My best bet is game probably goes to overtime. Ohio State's offense wasn't necessarily, humming in that game. That they had made some mistakes that got in their own way. They had some big plays. Obviously, the play to Travion comes to mind that, you probably stole some points in a situation where you weren't expecting them. So my best bet probably would have been that game goes to overtime. And then, the way college football overtime rules go, you don't really know what happens. I think a big reason maybe it comes across as some people assuming Texas would have won is obviously momentum would have completely flipped at that point, right? And you're late in the game and you're telling yourselves, oh boy, here we go again. Ryan Day late in games and, what's going to happen? Things are going to get tense and suddenly all the pressure starts to bubble and you're in Dallas and the Texas fans are, alive in that stadium and things get loud and it's tough. So I don't know. I'm sorry if it came across as us ever assuming that Texas would have won that game. I don't know if I have ever assumed that, but I do think it probably gets tight and everything gets a little bit more tense. Texas has some momentum and my bet is the game probably goes to overtime at that point. But obviously Ohio State having the ball a couple minutes to go, I could see where you would have confidence that Ohio State was going to go down and at least get a field goal. And based on what we saw in the national championship game, Jaden Fielding looked ready to go in the playoff, right? Because he had the kick against Oregon. He had the few in the championship game. We didn't see him in that Texas game. I mean, based on what we know now, he probably would have made a reasonable kick to win the game. So if Ohio State could have gotten to that situation, it would have been good. But what was weird about that game is Texas was kind of the one team that slowed down Ohio State's passing attack, relatively speaking. And then kind of that 2-minute drill, you're really leaning on your passing game. So I part of me wishes we could have seen it because it would have been really interesting to see that, how Chip Kelly and Ryan Day would have attacked it. But I'm sure Ohio State fans are plenty thrilled that we didn't have to live in that bubble.
Map it out, Andrew. Last 2 minutes of the game. Texas just scores 21-21.
I think we're probably going to overtime. Because there would have been just over 2 minutes left, and Ohio State would have had the 2-minute warning. They would have had 3 timeouts. They would have had really, almost too much time. Like you would have had everything you needed because everything would have played out as, okay, all you got to do is get to the 30, the 35, and you've got a reasonable field goal attempt. But like Ohio State scored on their first drive, and then they really didn't do much of anything offensively that was sustained until the end of the game. They had a drive in the fourth quarter to score a touchdown, but the TreVeyon Henderson play, they score at the end of the first half. I mean, that's a great play by TreVeyon. It wasn't a drive. So I think we're going to overtime. If I had to bet, I still think Ohio State wins that game. And I think maybe what the texter's alluding to and maybe what they're kind of remembering is that, like, I think 2 things can be true. I think we can make fun of Texas for how that ended and how that drive went, because those couple plays at the goal line were just comical. You get down to the 2-yard line, then you get down to the 1-yard line, and you have like that toss play that loses 7. And we were kind of making fun of that. And it was just probably one of those, it's first and goal at the 1, man. They should have scored. I know Ohio State was the best defense in the country, but they probably should have scored and they should have tied the game. So I don't know if we're acting like Ohio State should have lost. I just think we're looking at it going, they probably should have gotten 36 inches and scored the tying touchdown with just over 3 minutes to play or whatever it was left in the game at that point. So yeah, I still think Ohio State wins in overtime. And I think, maybe there's another, especially if it goes to overtime, there's probably another play that people remember. It's not probably to the level of the Sawyer scoop and score, but I think that's what happens. I think Ohio State wins in overtime. The way that Texas was playing that defensive game, I mean, they were balling out, and I think they do enough to force it to overtime. But Ohio State's defense was having a really good game too. So like, even if Texas gets the ball back with a minute and a half left because Ohio State goes 3 and out or something like that, I don't think Texas has enough time to do anything because Ohio State's defense was playing very, very well that game. I know Texas would have just scored, but yeah, I think Ohio State wins in overtime.
What are we basing this idea that Texas should have scored off of?
They're at the 1-yard line.
No, I understand that.
They just drove right down the field and they're at the 1-yard line.
Okay, but like that, okay, that's logically speaking here. What are we basing this idea that Texas should have scored on Ohio State off of? When we had just been, but like,
Yeah, go ahead.
They got a goal line stop against Oregon. They had a goal line stop against Nebraska. They had a goal line stop against Penn State. Like, this is kind of what Ohio State had been doing all year, is getting goal line stop. So I get it. Yet logically speaking, if you just say Team A is on the 1-yard line of Team B, well, Team A should probably get into the end zone or at least get a field goal out of it. But the proof says that when you add the context of who Team A and who Team B are, Texas is a fine red zone team. They were 7th in the SEC in red zone touchdown percentage. They only scored on 63.77% of their red zone attempts. So that's middle of the road in your conference, let alone the country. So Texas not scoring in the red zone, Texas not getting in the end zone in the red zone because they scored on 92% of the red zone attempts because that's when you added field goal. But Texas not scoring a touchdown in the red zone isn't that bananas, especially when you add into the fact that this is one of the best red zone defenses in the country who had for weeks been showing us that just because you get to the 1-yard line doesn't mean you're going to end up with points. So that idea alone, like, it's a big deal because Jack got a fumble got to take it 83 yards the other way. Okay, but if Quinn Ewers doesn't fumble, Ohio State's still getting the ball back because that was 4th down. So I think I'm taking Dan's side a little bit because I don't know if I don't remember making it seem like, oh, if Ohio State doesn't get the scoop and score, maybe they lose that game. But from that aspect on, I'm just not going to automatically say, oh, just because you're on the 1 yard against that Ohio State
I don't
defense,
think
you're going to score.
I think you're perceiving it differently. I think the question is if Texas had scored. I don't think anyone's saying Texas should have scored.
No. I'm answering the point of like, oh, Texas is on the 1 yard line. How come you didn't get in the end zone? Well, because look at the team they're playing against any other team they probably could be. But fine, they scored and they have 2 minutes left. Neither of you think Ohio State can go score in 2 minute drill?
I think they could.
They absolutely could. They had Jeremiah Smith, and I know he had 1 catch for 3 yards that game.
Oh, they didn't have
But
Jeremiah.
you've got Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate. If Texas is gonna so kind of like at the last possession of a basketball game,
Yeah.
where it's like a tie game and you have like Steph Curry on the other side, or you have Kobe on the other side, or you have whoever on the other side. It's like we're gonna send 3 guys to that guy because it's late and we know where they're trying to go. So maybe the moment then isn't the Jack scoop and score. Maybe it's Emeka makes a 50-yard catch down the seam and puts Ohio State in field goal range, and that's the play, right? Like maybe there's going to be another play. So yeah, absolutely, Ohio State could have scored.
But
I
you're
mean,
picking them too. So
no.
why?
Why? Because this was the game log from both teams: punt, 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 touchdown from Texas, 1 play, 75-yard touchdown from Ohio State, where Texas brought a blitz on a screen, which I don't know why they did that. Ohio State in the second half, interception, punt, punt.
Well, they didn't bring a blitz on a screen. They sent the blitz, and Ohio State just so happened to dial up the right play for the blitz. It's not like they
Right. It
saw
was
a
the perfect play
pass
call.
being ran. It's like, look,
But Ohio State had not really had any sustained success since their opening drive of the game. Like I said, their touchdown play, not trying to take anything away from it. Great Travion touchdown, great play call, great athleticism by Travion to just blow by everybody down the sideline. They hadn't really marched, and that's what they would have had to do, you would have thought. Or maybe you just get a bomb, I guess, but Texas was playing really, really good defense that game. So that's why I think it would have gone to overtime. I think Ohio State would have won, so don't get mad at me, but
I'm just, we're
I
having a
think we're
conversation.
mad, but
You're saying,
they would have.
why
I
would I
think they
be
would
mad?
have won
I mean,
overtime.
I didn't win or lose the game. I was just watching it like you guys were. You're saying they didn't march. They went up 21-14 on a marching drive. They had
Yeah, right. They had 1 really sustained drive after their opening drive of the game. They had 1 sustained drive. It was 13 plays for 88 yards.
Stefan, why didn't you pick them to win it in regulation?
I just thought Texas's defense was playing well.
Andrew's like, you're getting mad. I'm about to agree with you guys, but my reasoning for agreeing with you guys is very different. Ohio State hadn't done that all year. They hadn't really had the only other time during the year where they had okay, let's go win the game on the final drive of the game was the Oregon game when they had the ball for the last minute and 47 seconds and they had 8 plays for 49 yards. That's when Will Howard didn't get down. Now, what played into that? Here's how that drive went. Because Oregon had just scored on a field goal to take a 32-31 lead. So they get the ball back on the 25. Will Howard gets sacked for 9 yards by Mateo Uiagalelei. So now it's 2nd and 19. He completes a pass to Carnell Tate for 13 yards. So now it's 3rd and 6. He converts that, throwing a pass to Emeka Egbuka. So now they're rolling. Then he completes a pass to Jeremiah Smith. And so now it's 2nd and 1. He completes another pass to Emeka Egbuka, which is like the shot, the 26-yard shot, which is I think I was dying, but I think that Emeka Egbuka 26-yard touchdown, 26-yard completion was that's the play. That's going to get them over the top here. They're definitely going to go convert this and go get a field goal out of this. They're going to win this game 34-32, regardless of what happens next. Completion on 1st down. They go no huddle, throw it to Jeremiah Smith, and they get a completion out of it for 7 yards, but that's the offensive pass interference play. That's completely just throws the entire drive off. So now it's 2nd and 25. So now you're trying to get chunk plays. You get an incompletion. Oregon calls a timeout with 10 seconds left because you're trying to make sure you have things set. They get another play, 3rd and 25. They try to get a completion to Jeremiah Smith. It gets broken up by Jabbar Muhammad. And then that's when Will Howard on the 3rd and 20, after a penalty because of an illegal substitution to Oregon, Will Howard runs for 12 yards, and that's game. That's the only other example we have of Ohio State in 2-minute drill. It's time to go win the game. And that's both a kudos to them because they never put themselves in that situation for the rest of the year, but it's also why we don't believe they could have done it, because the rest of the season is like the Nebraska game. They didn't end in a 2-minute drill. They ended with Jordan Hancock picking off De La Raiola. Penn State, they didn't end in a 2-minute drill. They ended with the defense got the stop at the goal line and they ran the last 5 minutes off the clock. They beat Purdue 40-0. They beat Northwestern 31-7. They beat Indiana 38-15. Michigan, you kind of didn't do it, but you also hadn't been doing it for basically the whole entire game there. And then their entire playoff run was Tennessee, that game is over by the 10-minute mark of the third quarter. Oregon, that game is over by the 10-minute mark of the second quarter. This was their first real, like, we have 2 minutes left. We need to go win the game. And you're asking someone to, that's why I was so combative about the red zone thing, Andrew, and the 1-yard goal line thing is where it was a reasonable expectation to feel like, oh, Texas got down to the 1-yard line, but Ohio State's still going to keep them out the end zone. Why? Because we had just spent 2.5 months watching them do that. So we wouldn't have been shocked if it happened. We're shocked by the way it happened because it created an historic moment, but I don't think we are shocked that a team who had goal line stands in like 5 of their last 6 games of the regular season got a goal line stand in a playoff game. But we had not seen them in 2-minute drill have success. So you're asking them to do something that, quite frankly, they hadn't been having success at all year, which is why I also do not think they would have converted. I think they would have won in overtime, because then you're just, overtimes are weird, and sometimes it just takes one explosive play. And then all of a sudden, the other team has to combat that with, hey, we just had a 25-yard touchdown play. Can you combat with that? I don't think Texas could have done that, but I'm with you guys.
But also,
I agree.
Texas had kicker problems in
Yeah, I
that
was
game.
gonna say their kicker didn't want overtime again. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
you remember they played Arizona State, and that kid was. Remember we were watching in the Rose Bowl press box. Steve Sarkisian, I forget the kid's name, but he like ran out to him. He put his hands on his helmet, and he's like giving him the like
The one thing he
what
should
looked
not have
like
done.
just the most like any given Sunday. Remember the Titans pump up movie speech. He's just combining all of them together. The miracle speech. You might miss this kick 9 times out of 10, but not this one. Like he's just ready to go, and he's like, he's gonna make this kick, and the kid sends it down the tunnel, and it was just not even close, and it was Texas like I think they changed their kicker, so they did not want overtime for that game. Texas would have had to score a touchdown, which I mean, look, they hadn't really done that either. Like they had really not many sustained drives as well.
I think
Nothing
what would have
tells
been
us.
interesting What would have been interesting those last couple of minutes is where it's different from Oregon is like Oregon, you're down 1, you have to be aggressive at all costs. Like tie game, you kind of are in this weird in between of like you want to be aggressive, go down and score, but you can't screw up and give the ball back to Texas with too much time on the clock either. Like it's a tricky situation.
Okay, one more thing before we take a break. Xander from Southern California, I have a topic I want to talk about for this upcoming season. What if Lincoln Kienholz ends up winning the starting job? I'm not saying that I would bet on him to do so, but what I'm saying is that from all accounts, Lincoln was winning all of spring until the spring game. And it's not like he had a terrible spring game or anything. So I'm just keeping the door open for Lincoln Kienholz to really push for this job because of his experience and him seemingly winning most of the spring practices. Like I said, I would probably bet on Sayin to win, but it seems like most people think it's a done deal, and I'm not sure of that. What do you guys think? Andrew, I want to start with you. Ryan Day said it. Heading into the spring game, Lincoln maybe had a little bit of a lead. And then Julian Sand had the spring game he had, and Lincoln kind of got off to a slow start. It does feel like we are talking about Ohio State's offense in terms of Julian Sand being under center, because and this is not going to be a conversation where any of us three need to walk away like, I don't know. I mean, Julian's not going to be a starter. I think we're going to think what we're going to think. Does the ceiling at all change, whether for the better or for the worse, in your head, if we get to August 19th and we're sitting in the team room in the Woody and Ryan Day goes, Lincoln Kienholz has won this battle?
No, I don't think. I think maybe I'm looking at it, from the glass half full standpoint, but like if we're talking about Julian Sand being this guy's talented enough to win the national championship game. And this guy, I don't know why I put on a different voice for that. This guy's talented enough to lead the Buckeyes to 12-0. And this guy's the best passer on the team. And like, if we're going to say all that because we believe it, well, what happens if Kienholz beats that guy out? Like what? Like Ryan Day is not gonna do something because like he has to send a message or hey, we're gonna see how the season goes because we open up with Grambling State and Ohio and Akron and Western Michigan and then we play a big time opponent. Like no, they open up with Texas. Like they open up with a big time opponent and what's gonna be a big time atmosphere. You're not going to hold anything back for that game. And you're not going to kind of see how things go and play some things out and kind of take it slow. You don't have that ability. So I would look at it and say, you know what? If Ohio State and Ryan Day think that Lincoln Kienholz is better than Julian Sayin, that should probably have people feeling optimistic that we had all this hype about Julian Sayin and we see all these things that we see about Julian Sayin and we hear all of these things. It's not just us and our, journalistic eye watching the quarterbacks throw going, hey guys, Julian looks better. Like it's players like was it Denzel at the combine who was talking about Julian? Like these are players that are talking about Julian in really high regard. So if Lincoln beats him out, yeah, I think people should be really excited about the ceiling of this team, really excited about the potential of this team. Because to me, that would mean that Ryan Day is pretty confident and pretty comfortable with Lincoln Kienholz being the guy because there's going to be a lot of scrutiny if you don't start Julian Sayin. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny if, you go into the Texas game and you lose with Kienholz as your starter. And you got to be ready to live with that. And I think people would be, kind of frustrated either way. But yeah, I'd look at it as a positive. It's like, hey man, we got this great option and somebody just might be better than him.
Stefan, is your opinion on what is possible this season change for the better or for the worse if the Kienholz wins this job?
I probably lean towards agreeing with Gillis just because I think we saw toward the end of the spring that it was, Julian was starting to come along and starting to play well. So if Lincoln beats him out, I think it would just be a result of Lincoln playing well. But to play devil's advocate, there is the flip side of we saw Julian struggle for a lot of the spring. And is there a chance that you get to August and the reason someone wins a quarterback battle is because you got to pick one of the two? So you end up just going with the more veteran guy, or you end up kind of just thinking, all right, this guy's not necessarily elite, but I think he's just better than where the other guy is right now. So there is that kind of worst case scenario of you pick between the lesser or the greater of two guys who you don't think are that great. I tend to agree with Andrew that I think the more likely result is that Lincoln is just so good that you have to play him. It's not a result of Julian being bad, but you do leave the door open because Julian is a true sophomore with very little experience who at times at the spring did not look great.
What has to happen this fall for that to change for you? Because right now I think it's a battle because they're both really, really good. When does this turn into 2023 where it's a battle because neither one of them is claiming the job?
I mean, if it, we're obviously going to have only so much time to watch the practices, but the spring game was really good compared to some of the practices that we saw. And if we get to fall camp and a lot of what we see is more of pre-spring game stuff, I might start getting a little bit concerned, to be quite honest. But if it starts looking like they're building off the spring game, which I think is going to happen, I think that's where kind of the positivity, the optimism comes from.
I'm assuming you agree with that, Andrew.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Cause I was thinking about, I was thinking about it as Stefan was talking. I was like, you know, I think the difference from the 2023 situation, the 2025 situation is there's a little bit more leeway and a little bit more room to grow because in the 2023 situation, the team was 11-0 and I know you lost a Big 10 game and that cost you what you wanted to get accomplished late in the season.
Big 10 game.
Just one of a handful that they play per year. No more, no different than the others, right? But like you lose the last game of the year and you lose to Michigan in that way, and everything kind of collapses, and there really isn't a moment of, hey, we can grow from this, or hey, we can build off of this. In 2025, I was thinking about this, like, if you could beat Texas and quarterback play is dicey, right? I don't want to make it seem like if the quarterback play is not good, you're going to lose. I mean, quarterback play typically is pretty indicative of how you're going to do in a game, but like, you can grow with the quarterback situation, and that to me the lessons that Ryan Day talked about from the title team, that would indicate to me that he thinks that guy, whether it's Kienholz or Sayin, and especially in this scenario that we're talking about is Kienholz, if he thinks Kienholz is the guy on August 30th, he's probably going to think Kienholz is the guy on December 10th, when the regular season's over and Big Ten championship week is over, and Ohio State's probably going to the playoff going, all right, let's win a national championship, because we saw this team last year specifically change the way they operated in a lot of different ways so that they could make it through a longer season. And I think that might be part of his calculus as well. Who can get us to the finish line against Texas, but it's also who can get us to the finish line down the road. And if he thinks it's Kienholz, I think he's earned the benefit of the doubt.
I think if Lincoln Kienholz wins the job, it might tell us a little bit about Julian Sand's mental makeup. Because that is a bigger piece of the pie that I think I've maybe ever thought about because of what Will Howard was as a quarterback, and the idea of, from a talent standpoint, he's the worst quarterback Ohio State's had since Ryan Day got here became the head coach. Though I think you can make a case that no, he's better than JT Barrett. He got drafted, JT Barrett didn't. So since Ryan Day has been the head coach, Will Howard's, from a talent standpoint, the worst quarterback he has had, and the NFL draft has told us that. The first two quarterbacks he had as the head coach were first-round draft picks. The third guy, who was the starting quarterback here, went ahead of the fourth guy he had here in the NFL draft that we just watched. But Will Howard's mental makeup made him uniquely qualified to pull this team out of a hole. And if Lincoln has that as part of his profile as a quarterback, and Julian Sand doesn't, and the ability to run the offense, they both can do it, regardless of what you think in terms of arm talent. If they both can run everything they need to run in the offense, and one guy's got the mental makeup that you can look that guy in the eye in the locker room when he's talking and believe everything he's saying and feel like he's not trying to fake it, that's the guy that Ryan Day is going to pick. And if that's Lincoln Kienholz, I think I learned something about Julian Sand and his ability to be that, because for as much, whatever it's worth, that matters with quarterback just as much as it is like, can you accurately throw a ball 40 yards down the field? In fact, that's almost more important when you're in a room where everybody can throw the ball 40 yards down the field, which is kind of the point. Everybody here is talented. Everybody here has a ceiling of being an NFL draft pick one day. Whether you reach that ceiling or not, it's a different conversation. But everybody on this roster, they bring them in here, and from day one, there is a world where they get to the finish line and they're hearing their name on NFL draft night. And then the quarterback room, you take it up a step where it's like everybody in the room has maybe first-round NFL draft talent, especially when they're recruiting the guys, not just bringing them in as portal guys. So when that's the case, when the talent to an extent is equal, what's a separator? And it's going to be what separated maybe Will Howard from some of the other options that were in the portal last year. And that's, yeah, he can do all this stuff on the football field, but it's also what he's like in the locker room and whether he takes command of this team or not. So I'm not going to be shocked if Lincoln Kienholz wins it. I'll just have new information on Julian Sand in terms of, do I think he'll ever be the starter here? Because I've seen the story of the 5-star quarterback who didn't start till year 3 in the program. And it just, for one reason more than another, it just never felt like that was it at quarterback. Okay. Let's take a break. If you want to have your comments and you want your thoughts and you want your questions talked about on the podcast, let's take a break. And then we're going to talk about the Big Ten team that Andrew hinted at before, along with maybe if we have any thoughts on the whole Jim Knowles thing now that he's had his say on ESPN in an article he wrote there. So let's take a break and we'll get into more of that stuff here.
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This message is brought to you by Abercrombie Kids, where the activewear is made for every summer activity, so your mini-me can bring their personal best. Summer days are always an adventure, from day camp to rec leagues and pool days. Abercrombie Kids has the shorts, tees, and swim to keep them comfy and keep up with them. Get everything for the entire summer at Abercrombie Kids. Shop in-store, online, or in the app.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis wrapping up the week's worth of pods. I'm not good at details. So, Stefan, you're going to help me out with these details. Sherrone Moore is suspended for 2 games, not to start the season, but at some point in the season. What are the games he's suspended for, and why is the Michigan head coach suspended this time in comparison to when Jim Harbaugh got suspended for a couple of games at the start of the 2023 season?
Yeah, definitely a lot of details in this stuff. So let's start with the suspension itself. That's the self-imposed proposal from Michigan, the 2-game suspension. That's essentially them saying, but okay, you got to kind of go back here, I guess. This isn't about the sign stealing scandal. This is more in relation to news broke about the sign stealing scandal, and then Sherrone Moore immediately deleted 52 texts from his phone between him and Connor Stallions. And that obviously the NCAA, by the way, deleting texts doesn't work. There's this thing called like clouds. Nothing ever goes away. So if you think deleting a text is going to like run away from your problems, unless it's like you trying to lie to your girlfriend, it's probably not going to work. So let's just start there.
By the way, that's a crazy comparison.
But even then,
listen, if your girlfriend takes you to court, she could.
Yeah, maybe she'll take you to court.
But even then, if you delete the text, you can go to the show recently deleted part of it and have to delete it again.
Yes, so this is us giving advice. So if you're deleting texts from your girlfriend, there's an extra step now to do that. And also, by the way, make sure she doesn't have your iCloud login, probably. Anyways. That's
incredible, Stefan. That's so good.
Anyways, the NCAA is able to find these texts. The people who do this kind of stuff can find these texts. Moral of the story is he has had run-ins with the NCAA in the past because of the recruiting stuff you talked about. I think Sherrone himself faced a 1-game suspension in 2023 because of that recruiting stuff. So you do this, you delete the text, you kind of become a repeat offender with the NCAA. There's probably going to be a suspension just because you've been doing this kind of stuff. That's Michigan get ahead of it, be like, you're right, NCAA. We'll suspend him 2 games so you don't have to suspend him. And then we're going to suspend him week 3 and week 4 because that's when they play Central Michigan, which, by the way, great irony and comedy. And shout out to Michigan. At least you could take a joke, I guess.
I love it.
And then week 4 is at Nebraska, which if Michigan thinks that's a easy win for them, we'll get there when we get there. But the reason it stands out is because you have to do consecutive games. So why wouldn't you do week 1 and week 2? Because week 1 you play New Mexico. Well, week 2 they play at Oklahoma. And that's Sherrone's alma mater. And that's a tough game. And he wants to coach that game. So that's why they picked week 3 and 4. All of this to say the NCAA could come back next month. June 6th and June 7th is when the hearing is with the Committee of Infractions is supposed to happen about like the sign stealing scandal itself. What is the punishment going to be for stealing signs, advanced scouting, things of that nature? Like what is going to happen because of that? Not because of the deleted text or anything like that, but like because of the sign stealing. That's what we're going to find out here in about a month. And we'll see if there's more suspensions. Part of me wonders if Michigan thinks that maybe Sherrone's going to get a 4-game suspension. So they said, we'll do 2. We'll pick these 2 games. And they kind of left the window open for the NCAA to just be like, hey, how about instead of weeks 3 and 4, we just do 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't know. Maybe that's literally just speculation from my part. I have no idea. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot more coming. It was hilarious when the thing came out about Michigan self-imposing the 2-game suspension. Every Michigan fan kind of came out and was like, LOL, you guys keep talking about the NCAA bringing out the hammer. This is it? Just a 2-game suspension? Like, no, this isn't it. This is kind of the start of it. And in my opinion, if Michigan thinks that like the NCAA is overreacting to the sign stealing stuff, and Michigan still self-imposed a 2-game suspension, that tells me that the NCAA is maybe going to be even harsher than that. Every report, and Ross Dellinger has been, with Yahoo Sports, has been outstanding covering all this. It seems like vacated wins and postseason bans are not coming. So if you think that Michigan is going to have to like vacate its 2023 national title, anticipate that and maybe be pleasantly surprised if it happens. If you're an Ohio State fan, it doesn't sound like anything like that is coming, but like taking away a few scholarships or putting some recruiting kind of limitations in place, that kind of stuff could happen in terms of punishments. And then obviously suspensions. I mean, Jim Harbaugh and some of the guys that have already left for the NFL, like they have show causes. And if they were to come back to college, they would face, like 4-year show cause, like things of that nature. It's all relevant now because Harbaugh's in the NFL and he's not going to come back to college at this point. He kind of ran away from any of these possible repercussions. But yeah, that's kind of all I know to this point. So it seems like more punishment could be coming Michigan's way, maybe a bigger suspension for Sherrone Moore. I don't know how much more there will be outside of that, because I think if you're an Ohio State fan, along with like wanting some future punishment, you probably want them to have to vacate some wins. It just doesn't sound like that's going to happen. So I wouldn't anticipate.
So the thing that I thought of when I first saw this was, God, that's really funny. And no, I'm not laughing at what happened. I'm not laughing at the severity of this. I'm laughing that they picked the games that he's suspended for. That I can't get my head wrapped around, that they picked the 3rd and 4th games because he wants to coach at his alma mater. Like, imagine if you're a parent listening to this, or like imagine when you were like a kid and you get in trouble for something. You sneak out of the house, you break curfew, I don't know what you do, you don't do your chores, whatever it is. And then your parents say, that's it, you're grounded for a week. And right before you think they're going to say that, you go, well, hey, what if I'm only grounded Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and then I'm not grounded Friday, Saturday for the next 2 weeks? What if we just didn't do that? It's the craziest thing that you could just say, hey, we're going to self-impose this ban. And it wouldn't get laughed at as much if it was just, hey, we're going to suspend him for the first 2 games because it's the first 2 games. But it's just the pick and choose of this thing. I literally laughed at, because I was like, this is insane. Like, does this not feel insane to anybody else that they're just picking and choosing what games they think they can suspend their coach for? That's crazy.
I mean, you do what you could. Like, for all intents and purposes, when Chase Young got suspended in 2019, the schedule just worked out perfectly. Where the 2 games he got suspended for were the 2 games Ohio State didn't need him to go beat Maryland 73-14 and Rutgers 56-21. But that's also why Ohio State got out ahead of it, so that they didn't get 4 games. So he didn't miss those 2 games and then miss Penn State and Michigan the week after that. But it's just, that happened in conglomerate to how the schedule is going. I don't think Michigan's is happening quite that way. We know why they're doing it. They pick the games where they feel like their head coach not being on the sideline will have the least amount of impact, which is why Stefan keeps going. If you think that Nebraska game is just going to be a run-of-the-mill Nebraska game where you're just going to walk out of there with a 3-score win, you might need to think twice about that. But it is what it is. It's like they had to be concurrent, so he couldn't do like, oh, you're suspended for week 1, then you can come back for Oklahoma, then you're suspended against Central Michigan again. If their schedule was like Ohio State's schedule, where you're playing Texas and you're playing Grambling State and Ohio, I guarantee you, if this was happening to Ohio State would suspended Ryan Day for Grambling State and Ohio, because they're 2 non-conference, essentially give me a win, pick your score games are concurrent. Michigan's are not necessarily set up that way.
Yeah, I think what's kind of weird to me, though, is if you have to pick, wouldn't you rather have your coach for the conference game? Like, is losing a non-conference game to Oklahoma really that? I don't know.
If
you lose to Oklahoma with Sherrone on the sideline and you're going into the Nebraska game without him, like, you're about to put yourself in a spot to be 2-2 and not
For sure.
with a tough schedule to go.
For sure, but we know why. He's there. So I get this. His alma mater. He wants to go coach. I get that.
Stefan,
And that's not even. It's more like why does this matter to Ohio State? Ohio State fans want to talk trash to Michigan. I understand that, but are there any actual real impact? Ryan Day's 1-4 against Michigan, and 24. He's got to eat that. That's a loss, dude. Like, you guys, that's coaching malpractice. That's ridiculous. But the other 3 losses, you are saying that just based off Dellinger's reporting and maybe the reporting of others as well, it does not sound like there is a world where those wins get vacated and we look up and all of a sudden Ryan Day's 1-1 against Michigan.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it.
Okay.
The only way this could, kind of impact Ohio State is if Michigan has to face some setbacks in terms of scholarship numbers, which I don't know how that's going to work with roster limits, but that's kind of a whole different thing. And then like recruiting, if Michigan can spend X amount of time recruiting as opposed to teams that are get to spend more, like things like that.
So, Stefan, I believe it's June 6th is when the hearing is.
7th,
Sorry if
yeah.
you said that already, but I believe it's June 6th when we have a hearing with the Committee of Infractions. Is that correct?
June 6th and 7th.
Okay. So we have a month until we'll find out. Got it.
Which makes sense. Michigan had been saying, their athletic director had been saying that there's going to be a resolution before the season starts. So last year, kind of, they got their notice of allegations in August, and then nothing really happened during the season. So this will at least when we are in May 2026, like, we're not going to be talking about if there's more punishments coming. Like, we're going to know before August, and I think that's just kind of going to be the end of the Connor Stallions thing.
I really hope not. Okay, fine. So the record book is going to have Ryan Day at 1-4, and you'll be shocked if that's not still true after June. Okay, that's what the record books say. That's what it says across history. But then there's the social aspect of this and how we talk about things. What's Ryan Day's record for you, Stefan? Because it happened. They cheated. Somebody was impacted, and it seems like Ohio State was maybe more impacted than others simply because that's their rival. And CJ Stroud of the quarterbacks was the most impacted quarterback because he's 0-2 against Michigan. It's drastically, fundamentally changed the way he's viewed in his tenure here, and it cost him a Heisman Trophy. At least 1. Maybe 2. Who knows? He was leading the Heisman race going into the last week of the season, and then they lost to Michigan, and Bryce Young led a comeback win over Auburn on a 90-yard drive to win that game. He wins the Heisman Trophy. They're undefeated. He's the best quarterback in college football in 2022. And then they lose to Michigan, and Caleb Williams looks pretty cool against Notre Dame and against UCLA, so he wins the Heisman Trophy. If Ohio State wins both of those games, you can make a strong case that CJ Stroud wins the Heisman either one of those years, which, again, drastically changes the way we view him. We're about to start doing a greatest Buckeye pod next week, and I'm sending out the brackets to our texters as we're having this pod right now, 614-350-3315. CJ Stroud's in the bracket, but he is a much lower name in the bracket than he would be had he won those Michigan games. In fact, I don't know if he's going to get out the first round of this bracket. And he's like a lock to make the Final Four in this bracket if they win those 2 games, given the way he played as an Ohio State football player. And he might have a Heisman Trophy attached to his name, which means he also might have a national championship attached to his name, because instead of him having to play Georgia in the semifinal, Michigan's playing Georgia in the semifinal. While he's playing TCU in a semifinal. But whatever, it is what it is. How do we talk about this from a social construct, Stefan, in terms of how you view those Michigan losses? Is Ryan Day still 1-4 in that world of how we would talk about this in the barbershop, regardless of what his record is on an actual piece of paper?
Yeah. And obviously, I kind of talk about this from outside the Ohio State sphere because I've only covered one Ohio State-Michigan game. It was the one this past season, which Ryan Day lost. But, like, the games you kind of circle and you start to question, like, 2021, no, I'd probably say lost. Like, that was a good Michigan team. You're on the road. You lost by 15. At some point, the winning streak was going to end. Whatever. You can kind of point to that and be like, you just lost. Like, you lost to Michigan. You lost your rival. Eventually, it's going to happen.
And Aiden Hutchinson doesn't need to steal your signs to kick your tackles out. But
Yes.
he's the number 2 pick in the NFL draft.
Right. 22 is obviously one you circle where it's, I mean, that was such a dominant second half from Michigan in Columbus. You know, we've heard players already talk about, like, there was some weird stuff going on in that game.
Yeah.
So that's the first game I circle and say, I understand if you're an Ohio State fan, like, that is a game you wish could have been played on at equal playing field. 100% get that. So I'm fine putting an asterisk next to that game. 2023 is probably, I think, the toughest debate because that was a great Michigan team. You're playing on the road. The sign stealing stuff at that point had come out. Harbaugh wasn't on the sideline. You know, we're led to believe that Michigan was no longer cheating at that point. Well, they had a couple of years of doing it already. So, like, with all due respect, if you do pretty decent on the midterm and you don't study for the final, you could still do pretty decent on the final, right? Like, some of that memory is still going to be in your head. So, I like, for a game that got decided by one possession, could that have impacted it? Maybe, maybe not. Like I said, that's a great Michigan team. You know, I think all of us are in agreement that Michigan cheating in 2023 is so stupid because you had one of the great teams in college football and now everyone's just talking about it in a certain light. Where if you had just played on a level playing field, you probably still might go undefeated and win a national title and still be talked about as one of the great teams. So, like, congrats, here's the consequences of your own actions. So 2023, I go back and forth because that Michigan team was good, but that Ohio State team was good too. And it was a one possession game on the road where if you think them cheating for X amount of months or years before impacted one play on one drive, that might be enough of an argument to say that Ohio State could have won that game. So, like, I probably say he's 2-3. Like, I'll give him one of either 22 or 23 as a win, but 21 and 24, I still don't give him.
It's like if I'm cheating off your paper during a test and maybe halfway through, it's 10 questions, it may be at like the fifth question, you look over and realize I'm cheating off of you, and I go, okay, fine, I'm going to stop cheating off of you. I still got the first 5 questions already. Erase those answers. No.
Buckeye Talk, giving you all the lessons on cheating and deleting text.
That's why we're here, man. There a reasonable case to be made, Andrew, that we can reset this thing. That era, those 5 games, really those 4 games, Ohio State was just better than Michigan in 2019, and they would have blown them off the field in 2020 had they played that game. Which is why when people bring up the Ryan Day allegedly saying on a coach's conference call, "Oh, we're going to hang 100 on you," he wasn't talking about 21. He was talking about 2020. And Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave would definitely have hung 100 on you because that Michigan team was awful. This saga of Ohio State,
Indiana almost hung 100 on them.
That's very true. Tom Allen's Indiana almost hung 100 on Ohio State. That defense was terrible. But what if we just reset it right now, Andrew? What if now, 2025 and on, it's Ryan Day, it's Sherrone Moore, and this is where it starts. And this is where we can start to judge Ryan Day off Michigan games cleanly, because that era of Buckeyes who went 0-4 is gone. Stefan's right. We got, 6 more months of talking about sign stealing stuff because they're going to have a resolution in June, and then people are going to talk about it for 5 months because that's just what it does. And then we're going to get to the game and people are going to bring it up again. And remember, you still cheated, but it feels like there's a chance to cut loose, start from scratch, and what Ryan Day does going forward with the Michigan game is where he should be judged by, because there's no extra context for the winning and losing other than they had a better game plan, they had better players than you that day.
I don't think that that's true. I don't think you start with like a fresh slate of snow in 2025. And I think that everything Steven said, if you copy paste that and just put it on a Buckeye Talk on November 20th, I think that that's correct. I think that that's fair of 2024. I think that if you put it before the 24 game, I think that that's fair. The 24 loss, I think, muddied those waters. I think you could absolutely say, I'm going to throw the challenge flag on this particular game or this particular set of games for Ryan Day against Michigan. All right, I'll hear that. The 2022 game is the one for me that you're like, all right, let's Interesting. Like you kind of start to think about it and you go, oh boy, all right, I don't know about that one. 21, yeah, like you said, Michigan just, I mean, they were really good that day.
But
2023, even
also, they were cheating.
they were, yeah,
That's like in the window.
yeah, and 2023, like that's an interesting one because it's like, yeah, they had been sign stealing for 2 years, but like everybody had been gone for 6 weeks, and it's like, how do you judge that when the head coach isn't in the building and the guy who was stealing all these signs are gone and Ohio State has time? It's a really tough 2023 debate as well. But the fact that all of this kind of cleaned house and you had a whole off season of this, and then you go into 2024, and not only that, Michigan's not very good in 2024. They were what, 6-5 going into that game. You could have knocked them down to 500 on the season if they lose that game. Ohio State's 10-1 with one loss, coming by 1 point on the road at a game where the ball dies on the other team's side of the field, who was the number one team in the country. Like you're right there as like one of the best teams in the country in the regular season. And Michigan wasn't sign stealing in 2024. I feel pretty confident that they weren't, because they probably would have been better if they'd been sign stealing, or at least they were doing a very bad job of sign stealing, because they weren't all that good offensively in 2024, and they weren't all that good all around in 2024. And then you lose that one, and that kind of took away for me the narrative of, well, they won a national championship and everything's resolved now, and now we can start fresh. Because it kind of felt like 2024 was the start fresh, where it's, if Ryan Day wins in 2024 and Ohio State wins in 2024, I think you're able to turn around and say, you know what, guys, they were cheating. They were cheating their butts off the last 3 years, and look what happens when they're not. We beat them. And I think you lost that benefit of the doubt when you play the way you did and they coach the way that they did that game.
But I think that group of Buckeyes lost that, because that's sure, you can look at it as that, but you can also look at it as that group of Ohio State football players. This is it. If they don't do it this time, they're never going to do it. Okay, well, they're never going to do it. They won an Natty, so that's whatever, but they never are going to be. And you could say that regardless of what Michigan was or wasn't doing, there was clearly a mental hurdle with that era of Ohio State football players when it comes to Michigan. I just don't think that applies to anybody still on the team. There aren't enough players still on the team who have had meaningful roles against Michigan. It's JJ was a freshman last year, so that could literally end up just being a blip on his radar of, he leaves here after the 26 season, and it's like, he was awesome. He just lost to Michigan one time. Caleb Downs has actually lost to Michigan twice. He lost to Michigan in a row, but still, one of them, he was an Ohio State football player, so that's not the same thing. Caleb Downs can leave here after the season and go, oh, his career was awesome. He just randomly lost to Michigan in 2024, right? Sonny Styles is the only guy who's had a meaningful role in multiple Michigan games. Everybody else, because I think you can apply it both ways. You can take them saying, hey, we're taking all the signage down, all the national championship stuff down, all that stuff, because we didn't win those games. Those guys, those 14 guys who just got drafted, those are the guys who were most responsible for that national championship. We're trying to carve out our own legacy. Okay, if we're going to do that with the things that we could be celebrating them with, then I think, Stefan, it's fair for us to do the things that we could also be knocking them for. Because Jermaine Matthews wasn't a starter against Michigan the last 2 years. He was a backup player. Edric Houston, it was a true freshman. Like JJ, they could end up just being a blip on his radar. Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz were watching on the sideline, and Tavian St. Clair was in the stands, right? They did as much in the Ohio State-Michigan game as we've done in the Ohio State-Michigan game. James Peoples was on the sideline. Max Clare was still living in West Lafayette. Cardinal Tate had a role, but he was like a secondary role. Even if he was a starter, he was wide receiver. There just aren't enough players on this team who have the history with that rivalry that the guys who just left had, even if they were on the team, because they didn't have true roles. So if we're going to say, okay, well, they're not claiming the Natty because they didn't win it, the other guys won it, they were just along for the ride, why can't that apply to Michigan as well? Why can't that apply to the negativity as well? And we use this as a way to go, that era of Ohio State wasn't good against Michigan. They won a national championship. They got over the hump. in that way, but could never beat Michigan. They got to wear that state. I don't know if this next era of Ryan Day Ohio State football has to wear that to where if Michigan scores a touchdown on their opening drive this year, we're all going, oh no, is this team going to get tight? The way that the last year's team was going to get tight, because that's what they know. Michigan scores, they get tight. I don't know if this era of Ohio State football knows that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think also, like, your leading voices in the room, like Jack Sawyer's attachment to the Michigan rivalry is at another level. I don't know if there's anyone on this roster like that. And I know, Sonny Styles from the area, he's going to be a captain. He hasn't beaten Michigan, all that. I don't want to like diminish what he thinks of the rivalry, but I don't think it's to the level of Jack Sawyer, right? Like that's a big voice in the room that was leading that. And it's like, you also showed that you can lose to Michigan and still accomplish a lot, which has never been done in Ohio State history. So does that reset things as well? Like, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation. I don't know if we know the answer to that.
I think I'm going to let it restart. I don't think everybody has to do that. I don't think, Andrew, you're wrong, because there's plenty of people on your side. It's like, no, he's 1-4. It sucks, but he's 1-4. He needs to live in that. I'm going to allow it to if they seem to be pressing the reset button on everything inside of the program. And so they don't get to only reset the button on the things that we should be showering them with praise. And I think they should be allowed to reset it with everything. So if he loses this year, okay, well, for me, it's its own chapter of new chapter, new book, same story.
I mean, even if this team wins a national title, we're talking about the 2025 national champs way differently than 2024 champs, right? 2024 champs was like, all this went wrong and you still came away victorious. Whereas 2025, it's like, and this JJ era, you're just going to win a national title every year, and so be it. Like, it's a whole nother conversation. Oh man, this is how the Julian Sayin era starts, with a national title in his first year as a starter. It's a different conversation. So if you beat Michigan, it's like, yeah, I think I'm starting to lean your way, where it's like, if you beat Michigan, it's not, man, thank God Jack Sawyer got that burden off his back. It's like, Julian Sayin's really damn good. Jeremiah Smith's really damn good. Sure, here comes Bryce Underwood. We're about to have some battles between these two, and Ohio State landed the first blow in this era of this rivalry.
Because that's what happened when Michigan won in 2021. Nobody thought Michigan was going to flip the rivalry in 2021. They thought, finally, Michigan got a win. Finally, a Michigan senior class doesn't have to leave here without a win over Ohio State. But nobody was going, is this the start of something new? Then they won in 2022. Then it became a conversation, but that was a brand new group of Michigan players. It wasn't a bunch of Michigan players who came back because COVID kind of ruined the 2020 season for them. And so they wanted to right their ship and write a better story. It wasn't that. It was, no. We're just good now. We're just a good football team. Cheating football team, but good football team still. You probably didn't need to cheat, but you did. So you made this complicated. The 2024 Ohio State-Michigan game would have been for Ohio State what it was for Michigan in 2021. It was, thank you, football gods. This group does not have to leave here without gold pants, because that would have been ugly. Imagine if they win that game. We'd have gone, man, everybody's celebrating. Imagine what it would have been like in here had they lost this game. Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be when they lost the game?
Kind of worse, actually. I didn't think anyone was going to get arrested.
So if they win that game, it's, we dodged the bullet there. It'd have been very much, you dodged the bullet. And let's go see if you can win a national championship. That would have been the story, dodging a bullet. If they lose this year, if they win this year, it's not dodging a bullet. It's starting something new. And maybe this is where Ohio State can flip it back in its favor. That's my theme for the Ohio State-Michigan thing. That's it. I'm ready for this to be done.
Yeah.
It's why we haven't talked about it until now. It's because it's not concrete things happening. It's just concept of concrete things happening. But it does sound like Michigan is trying to soften its punishment by suspending Sherrone Moore for 2 games. And now we get to see whether the NCAA goes, yeah, that's good enough, or goes, no. You're not even close to being punished.
Yeah, I think one thing that I wrote about this week, just in light of all this Michigan stuff, is like, Michigan just ended a season where it was not a great season, but they closed it by beating Ohio State and Alabama, 2 of the biggest brands in college football history. And then they're coming into this season with the number 1 quarterback in the class who they're paying $12 million for. And it's like, everything should be us media, us national media should be talking about this Michigan team bouncing back and being a factor in 2025. And consequences of your own actions, everyone's instead talking about the sign stealing scandal still. So, like, here's what you did. Here's your offseason hype. Is all of us still talking about this? I'm excited for it to be over, but it's like, this should not be Michigan's offseason. And it's become that because they decided to do something that you're not supposed to do. So,
They have
have fun dealing with that.
they had the most ideal rebuild season you could possibly have, and it's clouded. And talking about this stuff, okay.
And they had one of the greatest seasons ever, and it's clouded because that's what you decided to do. It is funny though. While we were talking about how June 6th, June 7th, we're finally going to get a resolution maybe to all this. Literally, as we were talking about that, the new pope was selected. The white smoke came out. So the white smoke on Michigan is hopefully on the horizon. We can be done talking about Connor Stallion.
I mean, Ohio State has picked their starting quarterback.
White smoke from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Julian Sayin has been named.
We should do it that way. Have like the Bulls music there, and now
Scarlet Smoke.
quarterback line from Carlsbad, California, Julian Sayin. He should definitely do that. Any thoughts on what Jim Knowles had to say about how that all played out and him reaching out to Penn State in the middle of Ohio State's college football playoff run and why he ended up leaving, and just his overall thoughts of his tenure as Ohio State's defensive coordinator?
I thought it was a successful tenure. I mean, he ends up winning a national title with the #1 defense in the country.
Yeah.
But, I mean, him reaching out to Penn State, like, it all kind of underlined what I thought was kind of weird. There was a weird, like, not a weird urgency, like, there was an urgency to get a contract extension, but it just came at a weird time. Like, he wanted the extension done before the championship game, which, like, all of Ohio State's coaches were about to get raises and extensions if they won a national championship. So, like, just pump the brakes, like, beat Notre Dame and your extension's coming. And he even said that it was pretty clear at Ohio State that he was going to get an extension. Like, he never doubted that. And if he had gotten one before the championship game, he wouldn't have even entertained leaving Ohio State. But since they won the title and then a couple days passed and extension still wasn't done, he decided, all right, I better leave before these Penn State, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma jobs close. Well, you weren't losing your job. You didn't have to scramble. I don't know. It seemed to me like he was okay leaving, and I'll push Ohio State's hand to see how much money they'll give me, but I'm fine leaving. So, I don't know. He described it as awkward. I very much got that vibe. It seems very awkward because the timing of everything seemed very odd for me.
Andrew, any thoughts?
I don't know. I've gone back and forth. Because on the one hand, it's like he won a national championship. He did what he came to Columbus to do. And I think if you would have asked Ohio State fans a few years ago when he got hired, hey, if he's going to leave in 3 years and he's won a national championship, how are you going to feel about his tenure at Ohio State? Everybody's going to be like, heck yeah, sign me up. The ending was messy. And I think, I don't know, it's hard because, like, I get where he's coming from. I had the best defense in college football the last 2 years. Give me my money. Like, I get it. I get where Ohio State's coming from. Sit down, shut up. We still have a national championship to play. We still have a national championship to win. I don't know. I read that story, and frankly, the more interesting thing that I thought of was, I wonder if a change of voice is just going to be good for Ohio State. And I wonder if a change of voice is just going to be good for Penn State. Because there was a quote at the end of that article where they had Deni Dennis Sutton was quoted, and then they had a defensive tackle whose name I forget was quoted. And he was basically saying, well, Jim Knowles runs a pro-style defense, which is really going to benefit me because it's very multiple and it's very unique. The techniques, he's very analytical about it. And he was going through how he learns and how Jim Knowles teaches and what he's doing to help them understand the material. And I'm just kind of thinking about it. It's like, if you just replaced Knowles with Patricia, you get some of that with Ohio State, right? Like, how much have we heard Ohio State players go, oh, hey, it's a pro style defense and he's coached at the highest level and he's a winner and he's done that. Like, I'm not saying it's a negative thing. I think sometimes you get to a point where maybe hearing a different voice is beneficial. Maybe hearing a new guy is good. And maybe Ohio State could benefit from having a new guy come in and say, well, what if we did this? And maybe Penn State benefits from having a guy come in and say, what if we did this? I don't know. It's a very weird, complex issue. And I think Ohio State fans have a right to be mad at him. And I don't blame Ohio State fans for being mad at him. I don't know. It's a weird topic, and I'm not quite sure how to digest it. But those quotes about the players at the end kind of stuck out to me.
What's a pro style defense? No. What's an amateur style defense?
I don't know. What did Kerry Combs run?
I just love when people say, oh, they run a pro style offense, they run a pro style defense. Okay, what's an amateur style?
No, yeah, my favorite. No, it's not pro.
Well, I want to see the player who goes, oh man, I love this coach. He runs an amateur style defense, and that's what I signed up for.
You ever hear like an offensive coordinator or head coach or whoever like take a job, college, pro, high school, it doesn't, high school, doesn't matter, when they go, what kind of offense you gonna run? We're gonna be multiple. All right, thanks, man. What you mean you're gonna run this? What does that mean? You're gonna run 5 wide one play and the single wing the next play? What are you talking about?
That's exactly what it means. It's just that you're gonna look out there one play and we're gonna have 11, then we're gonna have 10, then we're gonna have 12. Yes, that's all it means. Sometimes we use football loves to use these buzzwords where it's just as simple as we have a lot of plays and a lot of formations.
And they have a lot of buzzwords for, hey guys, back off. I don't know yet. Like, let me figure it out. Let me get these guys in the weight room and on the football field, and then I'll let you know.
Coaching, my favorite coaching phrase is time will tell. Well, duh, that's how time works. Eventually you find out over time. I think it wasn't an eye-opener, but it was a reminder. And before I get into it, neither one of you grew up here, and neither one of you had covered schools to this magnitude before. And so this was new. And Stefan, I know you're coming from the SEC, so there's an element of it that's similar because Southern college football fans are nuts, but it's still a little different here when it's on you 34/7. What did you think of, what was your initial reaction to the fan base the first time we covered a game and Ohio State won by 30 points and you felt like everybody was on pins and needles because it didn't feel like the fan base thought it was good enough?
I've always understood it because you're not comparing Ohio State to Grambling.
Right.
What they do against Grambling, you're comparing to, when they play the best teams in the country. So like when they struggled to, slow down a mobile quarterback against Marshall, yeah, that stood out to me because they were going to play better mobile quarterbacks. And guess what? They had those troubles against Aiden Childs, and they struggled early against Riley Leonard, and Dylan Gabriel had a massive run that, kind of opened the game up and helped Oregon win that game. So I thought it was a little odd because it's like, yeah, you're right. Like when you win 60-7 and people are mad you gave up a touchdown, like I think that's kind of like hyperbolic in some ways. No one's mad that you gave up the touchdown. They're mad at if they saw something that could be a trend when you play better competition.
For sure. Andrew, because your first game is Indiana in 2023, and Ohio State won that game 23-3. So you beat a Big Ten team on the road by 20 points. And I don't think we were talking about that game like, oh, congratulations, Ohio State. You beat a Big Ten team on the road by 20 points. What was your reaction to that when you finally sat down and were like, man, I worked today, I did my job, but then you get home and you're seeing how fans are reacting to 23-3 against Indiana, only scoring 35 points against Youngstown State? What did you think?
Think about in what regard?
Just how the fan base is in terms of this team and how they talk about this team, how they view this team, the standard they kind of hold Ohio State to where winning a Big Ten game on the road by 20 points isn't good enough.
Yeah, that was probably the game that I saw it from the offense but frankly, I didn't really think a ton of that standard for the Indiana game because I think there were a lot of people like, look, I was only on the beat for like 6 weeks before the season started. I joined like late July, but like, I think there were a lot of people who wanted Devin Brown to be the starting quarterback. And I think what I read some of that as is, hey man, look, it was their first game of the year. It was a Big Ten opponent. Jim Knowles literally was like being sarcastic in the press conference going, you never know, they could run out and run the triple option. And they freaking ran the triple option against Ohio State. I was like, they won by 20 points. They could have won by more. I think people were just kind of leaning on their priors. The Youngstown State game was the one where I was like, oh, this is a very high standard, because I remember Youngstown State scored early and it was 7-0. And we had multiple people text in and say, fire the coach, fire Knowles, fire Day. This team's embarrassing, fire everybody. And I saw it on Twitter, and I know they won that game by 28 points, and it was a game that they sleptwalked through. But that was the one for me where I was like, this is weird. Cause like I've talked about this on this podcast before. I was coming from covering the NFL, where every game matters. Like I don't care if you're 11-0 playing a 1-10 team, you have to care about that game. You have to play that game. You have to talk about that game. And I remember looking at Steven, and I was like, this is weird. And he was like, yeah, Ohio State plays 3 or 4 games a year, and the rest of them, they're playing against themselves. And I think that was the moment for me, not the Indiana game, but the Youngstown State game, where I really saw, oh, wow, Ohio State fans have a very high standard of excellence for themselves. And frankly, it's the players do too, because you win 35-7. And I think Jim Knowles was actually quoted in that story of being like, you win 63-7 and people ask you about the 7. And that to me was the moment of like, oh, wow, this is intense.
So I'm just going to read an excerpt from Heather Dennis's article at ESPN, which is where a lot of this is coming from. Fans have been reacting to this all week. Knowles said the 2024 season at Ohio State was the toughest environment he had ever been a part of. There was finger pointing at the defense after the 32-31 October 12th loss at Oregon, and it was a grueling piecing the team back together after its 4th straight loss to Michigan in November, but that's not why he left. I don't think it did, Knowles said, referencing the pressure of coaching at Ohio State and if that affected his decision. I mean, if I'm honest with myself, I don't think it did. You become accustomed to it. It didn't keep me up at night or anything like that. I'm up nights trying to get it right, but I did that when I coached at Cornell or Western Michigan. It was the same way. You grind over those details for the players because you don't ever want to put them in a bad position or not have coached them something. You just become accustomed to the environment. When Knowles was hired at Ohio State, he said former friends and teammates who were in the Columbus area tried to warn him, this is an incredibly difficult and highly scrutinized place to coach. He said, fans are tough. I kind of blew it off, Knowles said. I'm like, I grew up in Philly. I've been around Eagles fans. We threw snowballs at Santa Claus. But yeah, when you're in it, it's really tough. It's real. Anybody who works there will, if they're being honest, will tell you that it's real. It's almost like a badge of honor there. It's like, oh yeah, well, this is Ohio State. This is what you have to expect. This is just the way it is here. If you give up a touchdown, but you win 63-7, somebody somewhere is going to have something to say about it. I don't think Jim Knowles really ever, because he had joked about us with that, right? The idea of like, I grew up in Philly, my dad was a cop, I'm used to people yelling at me and whatnot. I don't think Ohio State is a job for the long term. I think you eventually burn out if you're not completely 100% sold and built for it. Because when things go wrong, well, I mean, they haven't gone as wrong as they did on November 30th, 2024 in a long time. So that was to a different degree. But what you're talking about, Andrew, with the Youngstown State game in 2023, like that's a normal Saturday afternoon after the game of, we won. Winning's not enough. You have to dominate. The standard is the standard here. And I do think that 3 years is a long time to live in that, especially when the pressure is even higher because you've been losing to Michigan and you having uber talented rosters with top 5 draft picks at quarterback and top 5 draft picks at wide receiver and first round draft picks all over the place. And it feels like you're leaving wins on the table. It can wear on you over time. And so it makes me think about, it's something that you have to be built for, both as a coach and as a player. And so from a recruiting aspect, it makes me want to ask Ryan Day, what are you looking for in a player that lets you know he's ready for this, that he's built to deal with this, that C.J. Stroud was built to handle what it meant to be Ohio State starting quarterback, that Kyle McCord and Justin Fields and Will Howard and maybe now Julian Tavian St. Clair and Lincoln Kienholz, well, let you know that they're built for that, because that's a full-fledged conversation of, I mean, Ryan Day, you look at a picture of him in 2019 on his introductory press conference and what he looks like now, it's like a president going through a term. And I understand that this is not the only place where it's pressure-filled, But this is the only place in college football that hasn't had a down season in 25 plus years. So the standards is the standard. And I am just wondering if outside of everything that else was happening, if Jim Knowles' realization of that, and it's like, I've had enough of this.
Well, there was also that quote in that story about there was a lot of finger pointing after that Oregon game. And I'm wondering if the pressure cooker on the outside, if you can deal with it, if it's not hot inside, right? Like if you're dealing with the smoke outside and then all of a sudden you go inside and everybody, it's I'm not going to say the lunatic fringe, but it's like you have a lot of fans that are upset with you and you have a lot of fans that are, upset and saying, because look, they deserve to be criticized after the Oregon game. Like I'm not trying like I think Ohio State
31
fans,
points. Yeah.
and they probably should have given up more. And like I'm not trying to say that Ohio State fans are like wrong. I want to defend Ohio State fans here. They gave up 32 points on the road in a game that like players talked about we needed to simplify things and we weren't doing that. And then we did down the stretch and look what happened. And Oregon, they got stopped at the goal line. They kicked a field goal at the goal line. They missed a field goal. Like they went for 2 and they didn't get it. Like Oregon probably should have hung 40 on Ohio State's heads. And nobody else all season long scored more than 17 points. Ohio State deserved criticism for that. Knowles deserved criticism for that. The fans were right to criticize that. But I'm wondering if when, like I said, when the pressure cooker is so hot outside and you go inside and it's also that level of hot, it may be even hotter because, these are people that, you work with and people that you have to, these opinions directly matter what happened in a game. I am curious if that was part of this as well. Just, when you take the inside and the outside parts of this, it can be a lot. And look, he did a good job as defensive coordinator at Ohio State. I think that can't be lost in this scrum. Like they had the best defense in the country over a 2-year span. He did what he came here to do, and he had a great run. But I think you're right, Stephen. I think that when you hit that level, it is hard to manage.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stefan.
I think my takeaway from this though was like the quote of like, you blow someone out and give up 7 points, and that's what everyone talks about. Like that's maybe a few people in the media and a few fans on social media. Like that's relatively easy to ignore. It sounds to me like when the Oregon game happened, and we knew this in real time, Ryan Day stepped in and started working more with the defense. And when Knowles left, the reports had surfaced that Knowles wasn't too happy with some of that stuff and like what happened after the Oregon game. So like I got the vibe that's like the finger pointing that he's talking about. He's not talking about like fans pointing fingers. He's talking about inside the doors, which like that's all. That should all be fair. If a player performs poorly, you coach him up. If your defensive coordinator has a terrible game plan, the head coach better step in and coach him up. Like
His job, his
I don't
job.
know. Yes, I don't know. I didn't like that quote specifically, the whole finger pointing thing. I didn't like that because I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, like, yeah, dude, it's your fault. It's
That's
your
what the money's
your
for.
side of the ball's fault.
But also, it's Day's like we have bosses. If we're not doing our jobs, it's our boss's job to step in and be the bad guy and make sure we start doing our job. And it's also, it worked. You said it, Andrew. Nobody else for the rest of the regular season scored more than 17 points on Ohio State.
Nobody did that before Oregon either. That's the other thing. It was the Oregon game that he was talking about.
So the head coach doing what the head coach is supposed to do worked because you played better defensive. Because you know what? He did it again after they lost to Michigan. He stepped in there probably and went, all right, look, what are we doing here? Throw the freaking ball. And guess what they did? For 4 straight games, they threw the freaking ball. And they won that. Like Brian, I'm with you. I don't like the finger pointing part, but there is an element here of this is whatever you think a crazy fan base is. This is for better and for worse. This is that times 10. It's like going to watch it's like watching the New York Knicks right now. That fan base is nuts every time they win, but that's part of it. That's part of what you signed up for. They love you. They hate you, and then they love you again. And so maybe it seems like Jim Knowles just had enough of all of it, of the environment that is Ohio State and everything that comes with it, both inside the building and outside the building. And now he's back home coaching at Penn State.
And
by doing that and having what's happening in this article happening, November 1st is that much more interesting because now he gets to deal with it one more time for 2.5 hours on November 1st.
And it is really interesting because, like, I will say, it's not like he took a job for the same amount of money to go be the defensive coordinator at Illinois, right? Like,
No,
he
but
took a job. He
this is
took
a
a
bigger
defensive
fan
coordinator
base than Penn
job
State, though.
that's paying him as the highest paid defensive coordinator in the sport, near where he grew up. He grew up a fan of the team. It's not like he just was like randomly picked a team and said, "Get me the heck out of here." Like, he did go to a program that has had a really good defense for a bunch of years. Like, Penn State's not a slouch of a program. I know we make fun of James Franklin a lot, but like, Penn State is not bad. Penn State has had a good defense. They're a playoff team. There is part of that as well, where it's just, I think some of this can also be summed up as, hey man, they were going to give me more than $3 million and they were going to make me the highest paid defensive coordinator in the sport.
Yeah, but Ohio State would have done that. That's not the issue.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally fair point to have.
Again,
it's magnified at Ohio State too, but it's like, if you're talking about pressure, you went to Penn State in 2025.
Yeah, but that's like fake pressure because none of us actually think that Penn State's.
I mean, I don't know, man. James Franklin's getting yelled at by fans at spring games.
That's because
No.
Getting ready to fight with fans at spring games.
The other part of that you need to definitely clear up is that James Franklin is not just getting yelled at by fans. James Franklin's yelling at fans. James Franklin is turning around. And I thought about that when I saw that video. I was like, can you imagine Ryan Day doing this? Can you imagine, like, after the Michigan game, fans are yelling at Ryan Day and Ryan Day has to stop and he's pointing at somebody? I was like, that would be insane.
This is also, James Franklin does that. He yells at the fans over by the
It's crazy.
time. It's not a new thing. Yeah, you're right. Maybe we should. And you know what? Maybe we'll start doing that this summer. We'll start putting the pressure on Penn State because you pulled out the Ohio State Michigan formula. Let's bring everybody back and go win a natty outside of the guys who are obvious first round draft picks. Let's go get the job done. The only problem is none of us actually believe they're going to get the job done the way that people thought Michigan and Ohio State could get the job done. That's fine, though. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. That wraps up this week's pods. Next week, we officially start our greatest Buckeye bracket. The first region is out right now. The second region will be going out very soon as you're listening to this pod. 32 people trying to figure out who the greatest Ohio State Buckeye is in the history of Ohio State football. And that's not about best player. It's about who is the person you think you can't tell the story of Ohio State about. It's about who best exemplifies what it means to be a Buckeye. 614-350-3315. That's what we'll be doing for the next couple of weeks here. For Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means, and that was Buckeye Talk.